We are about to embark upon a series of strange and exciting, dangerous adventures. Adventures that will lead us to all parts of the world.
Hello, and welcome to another Bad Comic Review. This time we're looking at Hyperkind. This is one of the superhero titles by Clive Barker, part of Marvel's Razorline. This is from 1993, written by Fred Burke, pencils by Paris Cullins, of course created by Clive Barker, inks by Bob Petrecka, letters by Steve Dutro, colors by Tom Smith, edits by Mark McLaren, editor-in-chief Tom DeFalco. Now this is from around the time when Marvel was really getting kind of greedy with their cash grabs. The cover price on this was $250, which was about double what the regular cover price was. And you had this foil embossed cover, which looked kind of cool. It was very gimmicky. And inside you had the regular newsprint. The paper quality is slightly higher than newsprint, but not much. And honestly, they were trying to really sucker people into buying a lot of number ones, really, and special editions. And even the Avengers had foil embossed covers. Well, this really has a very 90s feel. We start off with a little teaser of what's to come. We see somebody in their armor, and they're called Paxis Warriors, Paxis, and the title of this story is Paxis Reborn. Well, we get a little teaser there with the heroes, but then we jump into what happened. We've got this older, homeless looking guy getting beat up by some thugs. He takes off. He's got some memory issues apparently. And then we meet Lisa, who's breaking up with her boyfriend because he's leaving her for some street trash floozy. So Lisa walks off just totally dejected, down on life. She walks through a homeless encampment and her friends go looking for her. The one friend is riding a skateboard because he's skater cool, and we see him leading the pack, and the ex-boyfriend and this trashy girl go after her. And that's when she meets up with this homeless looking guy, and standing around the fire is somebody called the Dutchman. We just get a brief glance of him, and he talks about how we've forgotten that during World War I there were some heroes, and one of them was Eisenbacher, and then we had Tempest, Dream Dance, Logica, Clarion, etc. Well, it turns out this guy, this homeless looking guy, is Eisenbacher, but it's a trap. The Dutchman is really a giant lizard man. It's the reptilians. So this lizard guy is claiming that Eisenbacher stole his powers from these aliens. Now he is Thermac, lawgiver of Quo. Pretty cool sounded generic name. And there's a fight, of course, that ensues. He tells the girl to run, gives her this ankh, which is actually like a key thing, and she goes to this place that he told her to go to. It's a secret lab, and they find these coffin things. She gets in one, and her friends have caught up with her. They've been following her, and then suddenly Eisenbacher and the lawgiver show up there to fight as well, and the others decide to hide in these sarcophagus things to get away from them. And Lisa emerges as this like superhero, her skin's replaced with metal or some slightly exaggerated nonsense, and she has these cool guns on her hands, and that's when we see Thermac really Hulk out, and he looks more like a boss villain in a Mario Brothers game. It's a very generic storyline, and it's okay. It's more of a younger reader's book because it's a little over the top, and the plot is contrived, but the writing isn't too bad. It's just aimed at more of a teenage audience, and I think it serves pretty well for a younger reader. I'd say 8 to 15 would be okay with this, but it is a little dated. The dialogue is a little ham-fisted. It's very kind of a generic origin story. Overall, I would say it's worth checking out if you could get it for like 50 cents, but I wouldn't pay more than $1 for it. It's not that memorable of a storyline, and it is a bit generic, but otherwise, it's not bad. It was an okay read. I enjoyed it. It just wasn't particularly memorable, and the characters I really have no connection to yet. I will read issue 2. I've got the whole series. There's only 9 issues in it, and then a special that they did for attempted relaunch, and we'll be checking those out in the near future. But overall, it was just kind of tepid. I thought it was alright. It just wasn't anything spectacular. It really wasn't worth the cover price then or now. The art is very, very 90s too, so if you like 1990s art, you'll probably actually like this, because it's not bad. It's just got kind of a dated feel. It has a very specific look to it, which a lot of people don't like. It's clearly inspired by the image artists, I would guess probably Todd McFarlane, but it's not bad. It's functional, and it's not bad for 90s art. So if you like 90s art, you'll definitely want to check it out. But that's just my take on it. As always, thank you so much for listening and supporting the channel. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing so you don't miss future reviews, and we hope to see you on the next one.
We are about to embark upon a series of strange and exciting, dangerous adventures. Adventures that will lead us to all parts of the world.
Hello and welcome to another Bad Comic Review. This time we're looking at Hyperkind, Issue 2. This is part of the Razorline's imprint from Marvel Comics, and these are characters from the imagination of Clive Barker. This is written by Fred Burke, pencils by Paris Cullins, inks by Bob Petrecka, letters by Steve Dutro, colors by Tom Smith, edits Mark Millar. The editor-in-chief was Tom DeFalco. Now we pick up where we left off in the middle of a fight, and this issue is mostly a fight issue. They're trying to stop the Thermac of Quo, trying to use their new powers. We see what happened to the fourth teenager that was part of the team. She becomes a character named Bliss, who's really pretty and can control like this energy form around her to make it solid. And we've got this guy Amok. He's got two knife hands. We've got Logix because the X makes it cooler. Seriously, they say that at the end of the issue. And we have the fourth member of the group who is the first one to get her powers. And her name is Armada. Armata. Armada. Get it? Ha 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 ha, because she has guns. Yeah, it's silly. As they're going through the issue, fighting the Thermac of Quo across all of Los Angeles, he's trying to convince them to give them the powers back, and he's trying to do it by force. And they're trying to convince him that no, they're needed. They can change the world because they're idealistic teenagers who think that a handful of people doing random destruction in the city can save the world. It's a very generic story. The conflict is the focus of the issue primarily, but their origins are really kind of weak and feel forced. They got their powers through this tube thing, and if you damage the sarcophagus, then they take damage too. Okay, that's interesting. But their whole idea of why they should retain their superpowers is just idealistic genericness, I guess. They show him images of things going on in the world, ethnic cleansing, disease, sexism, racism, intolerance, and species being extinct, and they think they might be the last generation. Well, bad news for you, this was 20 years ago, and there's a couple of them since then. It's an okay read. This issue is better than the first issue, and I enjoyed this one a lot more than the first issue. I thought the writing was a little bit better in this one, and there was a lot more going on, so it didn't feel quite as forced, but it is a little heavy-handed in the way that it's trying to create the heroes. And at the $1.75 price point, this was still much more expensive than the regular issue, and it's a lot more generic with no recognizable people, so I don't think it would have been worth that back in the day. The art's pretty good though. I did like the art. It has a very 90s look to it, but overall it was really good. Bliss especially looked really good. Whenever they had a human in here, I thought Paris Cullins did a good job. The monsters, if there was too many things going on at one time, like when Thermac was wrestling with Armada, it got a little busy visually, but the colors were done well, so it did work pretty well. So overall, would I recommend it? If you find it in a 50-cent bin, yes. Anything over that's probably overpaying, but this issue is definitely better than the first issue, and there's no foil embossed cover on this one. So I'd recommend it if you can find it really cheap, but beyond that, it's not something you really need to seek out and hunt down. But that's just my opinion. As always, thank you so much for listening and supporting the channel. If you enjoyed the video, hit the thumbs up and consider subscribing so you don't miss future reviews, and we hope to see you on the next one.
We are about to embark upon a series of strange and exciting, dangerous adventures. Adventures that will lead us to all parts of the world.
Hello and welcome to another Bad Comic Review. This time we're looking at Hyperkind. This is part of the Marvel Razorline series. This is issue 3. Now the Razorline series, as I've said before, is the Clive Barker created heroes, and these are the superheroes of the entire universe. So they're part of what's called the Paxis. It's written by Fred Burke. Paris Cullins did pencils. Petrecka and Riggs did the inks. Steve Dutro letters. Tom Smith colors. Mark Millar edits. Tom DeFalco was the editor-in-chief. Malcolm Smith consulting edits. Carl Potts executive edits. Now we start off with Armada having a nightmare. Her real name's Lisa, and she's dreaming about Eisenbacher and the Paxis in general. Now she thinks it's kind of related to the stress of going to school next week, start her senior year, and she sees all sorts of weird visions. You know, she sees George with her brother on his shoulders trying to delete her, and she sees how Bliss and Logix interact, Well, she wakes up and she's at the library doing research on Paxis. None of these kids are subtle at all. So they're nosing around very poorly and they're getting noticed for it. Meanwhile, Bliss is working at a strip club and she is very distracted, so she didn't do a very good job. So no money for her drug habit, and she gets really upset about that and goes looking for a Johnny boy in a nice car who will help her out. So it looks like she might be prostituting on the side when she's not stripping. Meanwhile, George is at the comic shop and finds a comic on Paxis from the Golden Age, but he can't afford it, so to raise the money, he's gonna do a drug run with one of his friends. Kenny's / Logic's is at the university computer lab with his dad, and he's trying to research Paxis as well, but a computer virus gets in his way, and he decides to transform using his key, jumps into the Matrix, as it were, tries to head to the mainframe that's causing the problems. This is real early stages of the internet type stuff, so it does feel a little bit dated. A lot of the terminology is different, but you get the basic idea because we still use a lot of the terms. They're just old-fashioned terms. You'll still hear them occasionally, though. Meanwhile, Bliss is starting to see these little black globs everywhere, and she's following them around, and they are hovering over people. So while she's hunting those down, George's drug deal goes bad, and he has to save his friend Carlos and beat the crap out of some bad guys, and he starts realizing that his key is blinking, so he knows something's wrong. So he thinks it's like acting like a pager to try and summon him to the others. So he heads out looking for them. Logix, meanwhile, pops out of a computer system, which happens to be at the Paragon Historical Trust, where a lot of old footage is stored from Paragon Films, where her dad works as like an executive. So she watches a serial about Paxis. One of the guards there, Samuel Kramer, tells her that, yeah, a lot of people get it confused. They think that because it was a serial and it was similar to a newsreel in look, that they were mistaking this fiction for reality. Well, we find out that Samuel is working for Paragon John, who is obviously a villain here, and Kenny pops out in human form just in time to talk to them, and she tries to make Kenny jealous very poorly, and then they leave together just as Bliss shows up following this blob. Well, she uses her dream powers to make it visible to everyone, and it kind of coalesces into a giant baby just as George shows up. So they end up transforming into their Hyperkind modes to fight this giant globular baby thing, and they have to sing it this song, which somehow they all know. The globs then drift apart as they realize that these globular things are actually the holes in people's memories that should be where Paxis is, because somebody is burying the truth about Paxis. Overall, this was actually the best issue of the series so far. It definitely improved significantly. The origin story was pretty wonky. There are some dated references in here, but it's a much better issue, and it's a good 50-cent bin buy. I wouldn't pay more than $1 for it, but this issue is significantly better than the others. So if you get a chance to pick up any of these issues, I would probably get this one. It recaps it well enough that you're not going to be too lost as to what happened in the first two issues, but they are significantly weaker. The art is very 90s. If you like 90s style art, this was considered knockoff art at the time because it was trying to emulate more popular creators, but I think it looks good for 90s art. It's not the greatest, but it's definitely not the worst I've ever seen as far as comic book art. So I would recommend it as a 50-cent to $1 purchase. I wouldn't pay more than that for it because these are characters that you're not going to really be familiar with. They were pretty obnoxious in the first two issues, and they're very flawed people. But overall, I think it's worth a read out of a 50-cent box. So if you get a chance to grab a copy there, I would do it. I thought it was pretty fun, and this issue was definitely the best one so far. Hopefully that'll continue through the rest of the series. But that's just my take. As always, thank you so much for listening and supporting the channel. If you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing so you don't miss future reviews, and we hope to see you on the next one.
We are about to embark upon a series of strange and exciting, dangerous adventures. Adventures that will lead us to all parts of the world.
Hello and welcome to another Bad Comic Review. This time we're looking at Hyperkind, issue 4 from Marvel's Razorline. This is from 1993. The Razorline was entirely characters created by Clive Barker. Now this one is written by Fred Burke, pencils by Paris Cullens, inks by Hamilton Riggs and Petrecka, letters by Steve Dutrow, colors by Tom Smith, edits by Martin McLaren, editor-in-chief was Tom DeFalco, consulting editor Malcolm Smith, executive editor Carl Potts. Now we start off with Paragon John, John, trying to dissuade the reporter who put up the story about the superheroes and explaining that there are no such thing. He issues a challenge that the superheroes should come out to the Historical Trust because he runs this media organization as well as several other interests, and he's the one that's been burying the truth about Paxis. And we learn that there's actually a video game where the Paxis are actually killers. The characters are called Paxters, and they're these monsters that you have to hunt down and kill. Well, Paragon John's the one that destroyed them last time, so obviously this is some of his influence and machinations. And George ends up getting interviewed by the news and giving John the idea to create a movie based on them called Hyperkind, so he issues a summons to have his men work on that. And he ends up killing someone with like this alien metal or whatever from his cane, and he releases a gas which makes his men forget. Well, the Hyperkind are dumb teenagers, so they fall for the idea of getting trapped, and they get themselves in the middle of a kill box, and all these soldiers are surrounding them while Amok goes after them, but this gas starts coming out, and Logix figures out what's going on. He gets 2 of the masks, but it's not enough. Amok doesn't listen to him, and when Bliss tries to create another mask and an army of phantom Hyperkinds, the military guys start shooting them, and it creates a psychic backlash, which knocks her down, because she's still not super familiar with her powers. Well, they all end up getting captured, and we're left with a cliffhanger with all 4 of them. They still don't have a 5th member yet, but that might come into play with the next issue. Overall, this was a pretty solid issue. It was definitely aimed at younger readers. Was it worth the original cover price? No, and it still isn't. This is 50-cent box material, but the series has been getting better, and it shows. Issue 3 was significantly better than the first issue. They worked out a lot of the problems, and they've clearly put a lot more effort into the last 2 issues. So this was actually a fairly passable read. The art style, while not the best of its era in the 90s, was definitely better drawn than most of the Marvel books today. So I think there was definitely a much more attention to anatomy and detailing. Even if there's a lot of loose aspects of the art, there are plenty of flaws with it. It's definitely not perfect, but it is still high class, where they do know the anatomy. They know how to make people look good, how to make the characters look cool in their outfits, a lot of dynamic poses, and there's no traced photos or any of that goofy nonsense. So overall, it's a good 50-cent box buy. So if you find it really cheap, I would pick it up as just a quick read, or if you know someone that wants to get into comics and you rate a 50-cent box to get them some stuff to look at, this would be a decent story. So I would recommend it for that. As far as mature readers or long-time readers wanting something of a good superhero nature, it might work for you, but it probably will feel very dated because it's definitely a product of its time. There's a lot of things that are different now than were around then. For instance, the broadcast media aspect of it was significantly different then. They didn't have YouTube or any of the internet broadcasting abilities that we do now, so a lot of the stuff that happens in this issue probably would have been bypassed by today's standards. But still, it was a fun read. I didn't feel bad for wasting my $1 that I paid for it. I probably overpaid though. So if you can find it cheap, give it a shot, see what you think. But that's just my take on it. As always, thank you so much for listening and supporting the channel. If you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing so you don't miss future reviews, and we hope to see you on the next one.
We are about to embark upon a series of strange and exciting, dangerous adventures. Adventures that will lead us to all parts of the world.
Hello, and welcome to another Bad Comic Review. This time we're looking at Hyperkind issue 5. This is part of the Clive Barker series imprint from Marvel Comics called Razorline. This issue is written by Fred Burke, pencils by Paris Cullins and Francesco, inks by Bob Petrica and Jordi Ensign, letters Steve Dutro, colors Tom Smith, edits Mark McLaren, consulting editor Malcolm Smith, executive editor Carl Potts, editor-in-chief was Tom DeFalco. Now, Paragon John has all of the Hyperkind hostage. He has Armada, Amok, Logix, and Bliss. And now we learn the secret history of what happened to the original Hyperkind, the group called Paxis. This guy originally wanted to be a member of the Paxis, but they rejected him for some reason. And they ended up with a sidekick called Scooter. In his anger, he teamed up with a guy named Dr. Transom, who was one of his shrinks, who was very maniacal and did some electroshock and other tortures to him. Well, together together they created something called the Zaniacs, which were like these mutated people. Then he went on to create a brainwashing solution that was inspired by revisionist history, and it was called Zona. And using this Zona and subliminal messaging on his TV networks, which he inherited after he murdered his own father, he was able to convince people that the Paxis didn't really exist. And one by one he set about killing them. Only Eisenbacher got away with the keys, and he refused to give the keys back to Thermac, and Paragon John went on to effectively erase the memory of everyone. He seized records, he bribed officials, and then he created these fictional movies to confuse people further, just in case. Now, Logix uses some really lame logic to convince Paragon John that they have a fifth sarcophagus that wasn't used, and they can transform him into the last Hyperkind, and he goes along with it, but of course it's a trick, and Logix is able to free his friends, and it turns out that while they were captured, somebody used the fifth sarcophagus and stole the final power. Now, at the end of the issue, we have a reference to Hokum and Hex, which is where a crossover is going to happen next issue, but next issue is the part 2, so we're going to have to look at Hokum and Hex 1 through 5 first. All in all, this was kind of a boring issue. A lot happens. You get some good history here. I don't want to say it's written poorly. It's just very inconsistent. Previous couple issues had actually been pretty solid. This one's pretty lame. It's definitely aimed at a younger audience, which just doesn't justify its price point. I don't know exactly what they were going for here, but this issue was very condensed and almost ham-fisted in the way that they're pushing the storyline and making this guy out to be completely maniacal and over-the-top cartoonishly evil. His motivation is believable, but not the execution of it, and it's very jammed in here. This would have been better as like a flashback story and just do like a two-parter where you show the actual original Paxis being taken down. I think that would have served it better. Instead, it's all kind of wedged in here, and it's comes off as a little forced and almost lazy. I don't know. It's very inconsistent with the rest of the series, except the first issue. It's a lot like reverting back to all the bad aspects of issue 1. Would I recommend it? Not for more than whatever you can find in a bargain bin. 25 cents, 50 cents. That's about it. If you're a completionist, you'll want to pick it up, but don't pay more than $1 for it. It's just not worth it. These aren't issues that are going to be considered classics, and this issue especially is incredibly weak. I think the inconsistency really hurts the series. I'm not going to recommend it unless you're a big fan of the series. Other than that, it just fills in some gaps on what happened to the original group, which was interesting in a way, but it's really a slide down from the last couple issues, so I wouldn't pay more than $1 for it. It's a good read for younger readers, but older readers and more mature, advanced readers aren't going to really get anything out of it. It comes off as being kind of Silver Age in the style of writing. If you're a Silver Age fan, you might like it, but beyond that, its main value is going to be in that it fills in some gaps. But that's just my opinion. As always, thank you so much for listening and supporting the channel. If you enjoyed the video, hit the thumbs up and consider subscribing so you don't miss future reviews, and we hope to see you on the next one.
We are about to embark upon a series of strange and exciting, dangerous adventures. Adventures that will lead us to all parts of the world.
Hello and welcome to another Bad Comic Review. This time we're looking at Hyperkind, issue 6. This is from Marvel Comics' Razorline imprint, part of the Barker-verse, as it is often called, which are characters created by Clive Barker. This issue was written by Fred Burke, pencils by Paris Cullins, inks by Bob Petrica and Mike Halbleib, colors by Tom Smith, letters by Vicky Williams, edits by Mark McLaren, editor-in-chief was Tom DeFalco. Now, as I've said before, Hyperkind tends to be written at a slightly younger pace than a lot of the other books of the time, and this issue is no exception. Now, the gimmick here is that the issue is written vertically instead of horizontally, so you actually have to turn the issue sideways. They did this with an issue of X-Force. It's just a cheap gimmick to try and get some kind of attention, and that's usually not a good sign, and it's not here either. Well, this is part 2 of the crossover with Hokum and Hex, which we saw in Hokum and Hex issue 5 was part 1, so now now we have the fact that the Vexus have been freed from their lava-encrusted tombs where they've been since like the 1940s. So we've got bad guys like Vigil, Slog, Memon, Quietus, and Anarchy, and they are trying to fight the Hyperkind, who they think are in the way of the Paxis, which are all dead. And we do see a member of this group called the Faithful. We saw reference to them in Hokum and Hex number 5. They are apparently people that believed the Paxis were real and that were somehow either immune or maybe just seeing through what Paragon John was doing to hide the history of the Paxis. Well, the team doesn't really act like a team at all. The Hyperkind are very disorganized. They keep getting themselves in trouble by drifting off on their own or not working as a team. Lisa has a real attitude problem still with Bliss. They use that to their advantage to escape a web of petty rationalism, like how can I fly? Humans can't fly, that sort of thing. It's sort of as a cheap way of breaking the superhero illusion. Well, a long fight ensues. The character Maman is pretty interesting. He has this ability called Cold Gold. He's like got a Midas touch sort of thing, but he can encase people in gold and make them kind of in their own little universe, and they can break out of it, which Lisa does using her vast ego apparently. And the others have similar powers. They're pretty interesting bad guys actually, but Trip is really the only one trying to work as a member of a team. Amok is a total jerk to him, doesn't want to work with him, doesn't want to listen. This Slog guy can hide people in his stomach. It's pretty gross. There's even a scene where Trip uses a whoopee cushion to save some of their lives. The fight scene's pretty good. It's mostly a combat issue, but all in all, it looks like Trip is able to take out one of the members. Otherwise, the bad guys do get away. It's an okay issue. It didn't really do anything for me. I thought it was, the dialogue was just atrocious through most of it. Trip's handled okay, but he's a pretty straightforward character. The others are very uncooperative. They have these petty rivalries that would really be very self-destructive to the group, and I don't think they would have really survived this combat if it hadn't been for Trip, who was actually trying to help them, and they really didn't seem to appreciate his assistance. But Logic's talk's kind of weird in this, and so do a couple of the others. It was very 1960s feeling as far as dialogue goes. I think that's a really weak part of the series is the dialogue, but if you can find it for less than $1, it might be worth picking up. It was an okay part 2, I guess, for its time and for what it is. It definitely was not worth the $1.75 cover price at all. That was vast overpricing of a comic book even for then, and that's really what killed it. I think if this had been a regular price comic, it probably would have lasted a little longer. I can see why these really didn't make it. Most of these Razorline books were just overpriced for what they were, and this was no exception. But like I said, it's okay if you find it in a quarter bin or a 50-cent box. Something for $1 or less, I would recommend it as something to fill time. The gimmicks in this are pretty annoying though, especially the sideways reading. I hate that. But that's just my take on it. As always, thank you so much for listening and supporting the channel. If you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe so you don't miss future reviews, and we hope to see you on the next one.
We are about to embark upon a series of strange and exciting, dangerous adventures. Adventures that will lead us to all parts of the world.
Hello, and welcome to another Bad Comic Review. This time we're looking at Hyperkind, issue 7. This is from the 1990s series from Marvel Comics under their Razorline imprint, which are, of course, part of the Barker-verse, which are characters created by Clive Barker. This issue was written by Fred Burke, pencils by Paris Cullens, Mike Halbeleeb did inks, Steve Dertro, letters, Tom Smith colors, Mark McLaren editor, Tom DeFalco editor-in-chief. Okay, so we pick up where we left off with our heroes clutching the body of their friend Armada, who they thought was dead, but apparently she may still be alive, barely though, so she's kind of loosely hanging on. And then they talk about how if Kenny hadn't broken the computer, they might know how to save her, but they don't. And that's when they remember this old hopscotch rhyme that Bliss used to know. And we learned some really disturbing things about what her dad did to her, which is apparently why she's a stripper and possibly an escort of some sort. Well, there's this poem that had been being spouted in issue 3 by the blob creature, which is also the same as this hopscotch story, and she thinks that maybe there's a connection between this old rhyme and a hidden source of information, because the Paxis were forgotten about purposely by Paragon John, but maybe somebody knows more and is awake to what's going on and was able to relay some information through this rhyme. So they have to follow the clues, which are kind of lazy, honestly. It's very unimaginative. It leads to an observatory where they see a secret set of stairs that goes to the side of a hill, and they follow it, blazing a trail to this metal door. Well, they end up screwing up the secret password, and they have to break the door down, and it leads into this MC Escher building with staircases that go all sorts of crazy directions. Also kind of lazy, but there's a lot of cool stuff of the Paxis hanging up and around, which actually would have looked cooler in a different setting instead of kind of being a little try-hard. Well, here they meet Amber Transphasia. She is apparently a leader of the Faithful and may have been a Paxis at one time, and she knows Thermac, lawgiver of Quo, who first showed up in 1917. We get a little bit of history about the Paxis in here too, which that was kind of cool. She explains to them that their energy is based off of life force, and that's how Armada's weapons work, and by depleting her weaponry, she actually depleted herself, and each power comes with its own negative. For example, Amuk's power is based on his temper, which is the downside of instinct, so when he loses his temper, he's actually hurting himself. It's all a little cheap. This is very, very generic and lazy, but the point is they had to get to the sarcophagus, put Armada in, and it reinvigorates her, and they have a big group hug. But Bliss doesn't quite trust the lady, but they don't really have much of a choice. This was a pretty tepid issue. The dialogue is definitely pretty dated, and it's aimed at younger audiences, which is fine. It does have the Comics Code seal of approval from the Comics Code Authority, so it's a fairly safe book for younger readers, but I don't think there's a whole lot here for older readers. Honestly, it was a pretty weak issue that could have been a lot better. For what it is, it's okay, but if you're looking to pick this up, I don't think it was worth more than $1. I'd be a little stretched to even say it was worth $1. If you see it in one of the cheap boxes, pick it up for a kid you know. I don't think your average adult's going to find anything too interesting here, but that's just my take on it. As always, thank you so much for listening and supporting the channel. If you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe so you don't miss future reviews, and we hope to see you on the next one.
We are about to embark upon a series of strange and exciting, dangerous adventures. Adventures that will lead us to all parts of the world.
Hello and welcome to another Bad Comic Review. This time we're looking at Hyperkind issue 8. This is part of the Razorline imprint from Marvel Comics. It's from the 1990s, so you get kind of a mixed bag sometimes. These are based on characters created by Clive Barker, composing part of the Barkerverse. Story was by Fred Burke, guest pencils by Roger Cruz, inks by Petreka and Halblieb, letters by Steve Dutro, colors by Tom Smith, edits by Mark McLaren. The editor-in-chief was Tom DeFalco. So a few issues back in Hokum and Hex, Z-Man realized who he was, but he ended up dying at the end of the issue. And when he did, his powers kind of canceled out. So some of the people that he had made disappear reappeared. That event plays into this issue because he had killed Tempest by disseminating her atoms. Well, now she's back because with Z-Man gone, she reassembles on the freeway in her underwear. And she has to kind of remember who she is, but in doing so, she accidentally reveals herself to Paragon John, his men. We don't actually see Paragon John, but we see a lot of the Paracorps and the evil doctor that works for him. Although she puts up a fight, she gets captured and they start to eject her with stuff, but she is actually saved by the Zaniacs, the failed experiments of Paragon John, and they ask her to help them get revenge. And we get a little bit of her origin story in here, and she swears revenge on Paragon John and the Hyperkind because she thinks they're bad guys. Unfortunately, this storyline goes nowhere because the series got canceled next issue, and then they did the special. This was actually a really solid issue. This was probably the best issue in the series so far, hands down. It was well written, it was concise, it told a really cool story about a hero coming back from being missing for 30 years, and they lock her up in a mental institution, and she gets freed by these these monsters. It's a really solid issue, and it's actually worth picking up. This issue would have been worth the $1.75 cover price because the art's solid, the story's really good. Unfortunately, the storyline never got a chance to go anywhere beyond this issue. Although it is a self-contained issue, it really could have led to a much better story later down the line, because how does she cope with not having her superpowers anymore, or is she capable of sharing powers with the person that currently has the power, which is Amok, because she was like the feral one of the group. And it told a really cool origin story. It's a real shame that the series got canceled when they had a really cool plot hook like this that actually could have given some more excellent stories like this one was. So this is definitely one of the highlights of the series, and if you get a chance to pick it up, I would definitely do that. By far the best issue in the series so far, and it's easily worth $1 or $2 to pick up. Unlike some of the other issues that are maybe worth 50 cents or $1, this is actually worth the money. But that's just my take on it. As always, thank you so much for listening and supporting the channel. If you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe so you don't miss future reviews, and we hope to see you on the next one.
We are about to embark upon a series of strange and exciting, dangerous adventures. Adventures that will lead us to all parts of the world.
Hello and welcome to another Bad Comic Review. This time we're looking at Hyperkind, issue 9. This is the last issue of the regular Hyperkind series, part of the Razorline imprint from Marvel Comics. These are of course superheroes from the mind of Clive Barker, and part of the Barkerverse imprint that was called Razorline. Story by Fred Burke, pencils by Paris Cullins and Steve Scroce, inks by Mike Halblieb, letters by Steve Dutro, colors by Tom Smith, edits by Mark McLaren. Now, Lazarus Prime, who was a former villain of the Paxis, has returned after Ambitrance. She was once a member of the original Paxis, and Lazarus is after her because he was in love with her, but they tricked him, and, well, they thought they killed him, but he didn't actually die. He was repaired by his Robo Squad of androids that he created. Well, realizing that she's in danger, the Hyperkind come looking for her, and they try and save her, but in doing so, Logix gets trapped inside of Lazarus, and they need to find the person who has the 5th key. So they triangulate their position because in issue, I think it was 3, Amok was able to find them by the pulsing of his key, alerting him that the others may be in danger. So they use that same technique, but by triangulating where they're at to find the 5th key. And they find it in an image on the side of a building on Venice Beach. And it turns out to be the most ridiculous thing possible. The person that took the 5th power was in fact Eisenbacher's dog. So a homeless guy's dog managed to somehow activate a sarcophagus and give himself the super consciousness of the 5th power. But they use that to their advantage, and they find an ally in him, and he helps free Logix. And the series just sort of abruptly ends. Ambitrax takes them back to Faithful headquarters, where she's going to explain to them some of what happened, but we just get a little 4-panel thing, and then this issue ends. And it's okay. It's unlike last issue, which was actually great. This is back to being incredibly mediocre. It's an okay issue, but it's aimed at a slightly younger audience, whereas the last issue was definitely more treated everybody kind of the same. This seems like it's aimed back at younger readers once again, and it would be fine for any middle or high school kid, but I don't know, it felt kind of like they were dumbing it down a bit. Overall, it's an okay issue, but I wouldn't pay more than 50 cents or $1 for it. It's not something high on the list. If you're gonna pick one issue out of this entire series, make it issue 8, because as far as the rest of the issues go, they're pretty tepid, mostly mediocre, sometimes outright disappointing in a lot of ways. But the art's not bad in this one, about all there is to say about it. It's a pretty tepid, middle-of-the-road issue. There's nothing exceptional or particularly memorable about most of this series. Overall, it's not bad as a read, but if you're looking for something that you're gonna want to collect, this probably isn't for you. But if you're going through a 50-cent box and you just want to get some comics to check out, yeah, it'd be worth picking up for a low enough price. But that's just my take. As always, thank you so much for listening and supporting the channel. If you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe so you don't miss future reviews, and we hope to see you on the next one.